Welcome to Betrayed Hearts Chronicles. The warm California sun bathed the rolling hills of Napa Valley in a golden glow, its light cascading over rows of meticulously arranged grapevines. Anna adjusted her oversized sunglasses as she stepped out of her car, the gravel crunching beneath her sandals. She had chosen this retreat on impulse, one of those find-yourself vacations that travel blogs claimed could work miracles. Whether or not it would help her marriage, Anna wasn't sure, but she was desperate for a break from the monotony. The vineyard sprawled out in front of her like a painting. Majestic oak trees lined the dirt pathways, and a rustic stone building served as the estate's centerpiece. A few visitors strolled along the property, wine glasses in hand, their laughter carried on the breeze. Anna gripped the handle of her suitcase tighter, feeling a pang of loneliness. "Welcome to Le Vignoble Soleil." The voice, rich and smooth, came from behind her. She turned and found herself face to face with a tall man in his late 30s, dressed casually in a white linen shirt and jeans. His olive skin glowed under the sun, and his dark hair curled slightly at the ends, as if he'd just run his hands through it. But it was his eyes, an intense hazel with flecks of green, that caught her attention. "Thank you," Anna said, her voice more breathless than intended. "I'm Victor," he said, extending a hand. "Winemaker and host. Let me guess, you're here for more than just the wine." Anna raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And what makes you say that?" Victor smiled, a slow, confident curve of his lips. "Most people come for a distraction. But you," he paused, his gaze sweeping over her carefully, "seem like you're searching for something." The comment unsettled her, though she couldn't decide why. "Maybe I am," she admitted softly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Well," he said, gesturing toward the estate, "this is the perfect place to find it. Let me give you a tour while they get your room ready." Anna hesitated but found herself nodding. Something about Victor's demeanor, a mix of charm and ease, made it impossible to refuse. The tour began in the main tasting room, a spacious hall with vaulted wooden beams and shelves lined with wine bottles. Victor explained the estate's history, weaving in poetic details about the soil and the grapes. Anna listened, captivated less by the story and more by the way he spoke. His voice like velvet, his words measured and deliberate. "Here, try this," Victor said, handing her a glass of rose. Their fingers brushed, and Anna felt a surprising jolt, like static electricity. She quickly pulled her hand back, hoping he hadn't noticed. "What do you think?" he asked, watching her intently as she took a sip. The wine was crisp and floral, but the taste barely registered. She was too aware of Victor's gaze, the way his eyes lingered on her lips as she drank. "It's lovely," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor nodded, pleased. "There's something magical about the first sip, isn't there? It's like meeting someone for the first time. You're not sure what to expect, but then it surprises you." Anna swallowed hard, unsure whether he was talking about the wine or something else entirely. As the tour continued, Victor led her to the vineyard's edge, where the vines stretched endlessly toward the horizon. He crouched to pick a cluster of grapes, his movements fluid and confident. "Taste these," he said, holding them out to her. Anna hesitated before plucking one from the bunch. Their hands brushed again, and this time Victor's touch lingered. Her pulse quickened as she placed the grape in her mouth, the sweet juice bursting on her tongue. "Good, isn't it?" he asked, his voice low. She nodded, unable to find the words. Victor straightened, brushing his hands on his jeans. "We're more than a vineyard here," he said, breaking the moment. "We believe in connection, to the earth, to the wine, to each other." The words resonated with Anna in a way she hadn't expected. For the past few years, she had felt disconnected from everything. Her husband, her work, even herself. Here, in this idyllic vineyard with this enigmatic man, she felt something stir inside her. "Thank you for the tour," she said, trying to steady her voice. "I think I'll take some time to settle in." Victor nodded, his expression unreadable. "Of course. But if you need anything, or if you'd like another tour, just ask." Later, as Anna unpacked in her cozy, sunlit room overlooking the vineyard, she couldn't shake the feeling of Victor's eyes on her or the way her heart had raced when he touched her. She told herself it was nothing, a fleeting moment, a harmless attraction. But deep down, she knew this trip was already shaping up to be more than she'd bargained for. The next morning, Anna stood on the stone balcony of her room, sipping freshly brewed coffee as the sun crept higher over the rolling hills. The vineyard was quiet, save for the faint chirping of birds and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. She tried to lose herself in the serenity of the scene, but her thoughts kept circling back to Victor. His lingering touch, his penetrating gaze, it had all felt too deliberate to be innocent. Shaking her head, she resolved to focus on herself. That was the whole point of coming here, to escape, to breathe, to think. Not to get distracted by a man she barely knew. By mid-morning, Anna found herself back in the main courtyard, drawn to the vineyard's daily activities. She watched workers bustling between the rows of vines, baskets of grapes slung over their shoulders. As she admired their efficiency, Victor appeared, his linen shirt rolled up to his elbows, exposing tanned forearms dusted with dirt. "Enjoying the view?" he asked, his lips curving into a sly smile. Anna started, embarrassed to be caught staring. "Yes, it's fascinating to see it all in action." Victor tilted his head, studying her. "Care to join in?" She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Come with me," he said, already walking toward the vines. "I'll show you how it's done." Before she knew it, Anna was in the thick of the vineyard, holding a pair of pruning shears as Victor demonstrated how to trim the leaves and harvest the grapes. His presence was magnetic, his enthusiasm infectious. "Here," he said, stepping behind her. He reached around her, his hands guiding hers to a ripe cluster of grapes. "Cut close to the stem, like this." Anna's pulse quickened as his body brushed against hers, his warmth enveloping her. She could feel the firm pressure of his chest against her back, his breath teasing the sensitive skin near her ear. She tried to focus on the task, but her grip faltered. Victor chuckled softly. "You're nervous," he said, his voice low and teasing. "No," she lied, her voice shaky. "I'm just not used to this." He didn't move away. Instead, his hands stayed on hers a moment longer than necessary. "You'll get the hang of it," he murmured, his voice like a caress. When he finally stepped back, Anna exhaled, realizing she had been holding her breath. She avoided his gaze, focusing instead on the grapes in her hand. Later, during lunch in the estate's garden, Victor appeared again, carrying 2 glasses of wine. Without asking, he sat across from her at the wrought iron table shaded by a sprawling oak tree. "Try this," he said, sliding a glass toward her. Anna hesitated but accepted. The wine was deep and velvety, its richness lingering on her tongue. "You know," Victor said, leaning back in his chair, "you seem like someone who doesn't let herself enjoy life often enough." She bristled, unsure whether to be offended or intrigued. "What makes you think that?" "Call it an instinct." He swirled his glass, watching the wine catch the sunlight. "You strike me as someone who's always giving to others but rarely taking for yourself." Anna's throat tightened. His words felt too accurate, too raw. She looked away, focusing on the distant hills. "That's a bold assumption." "Am I wrong?" he asked, his tone gentle. She didn't answer. Victor leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "You came here for a reason, Anna. What are you running from?" The question hit her like a slap. She hadn't told him her name, yet somehow he already knew it. She searched his face for an explanation, but he only offered a faint smile. "How do you?" "Your reservation," he said quickly, as if reading her mind. "I make it a point to know our guests." The tension between them was palpable now, an electric current crackling in the air. Anna felt exposed, as though Victor could see every thought she was trying to suppress. That evening, Anna attended a wine-tasting session in the estate cellar. The dimly lit space was cool and intimate, its stone walls lined with oak barrels and shelves of bottles. A small group of guests mingled, chatting and laughing as they sampled the selection. Victor appeared as if summoned, standing close enough that Anna could smell his cologne, something earthy and masculine. He poured her a glass of red wine, their fingers brushing yet again. "Careful," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "This one has a way of sneaking up on you." Anna took a sip, the wine's bold flavor spreading warmth through her chest. She glanced up at Victor, and their eyes locked. The room seemed to shrink around them, the chatter of the other guests fading into the background. "Do you always charm your guests like this?" she asked, attempting to sound casual. Victor's smile was slow, deliberate. "Only the ones who need it." Her breath hitched, her heart thundering in her chest. The tension between them had grown unbearable, a taut string ready to snap. She set her glass down, her fingers trembling slightly. "I should go," she said abruptly, turning to leave. Victor caught her wrist, his touch firm but not forceful. "Anna," he said softly, his voice laced with something she couldn't quite place. "Concern? Desire? You don't have to run." She froze, her mind racing. Every instinct told her to pull away, to put as much distance as possible between them. But her body betrayed her, leaning slightly closer, drawn to the heat of his hand on her skin. "I don't know what you mean," she whispered, avoiding his gaze. Victor released her wrist, his touch lingering like an invisible imprint. "You will," he said, his voice heavy with meaning. Anna left the cellar in a daze, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and longing. Victor was pulling her into a world she wasn't sure she wanted to enter, but one she couldn't resist. The vineyard hummed with life the next day. Workers bustled between the rows of vines, laughter and chatter drifting through the air. Anna wandered among them, clutching her coffee cup and pretending to admire the scenery, though her mind was elsewhere. She replayed her moments with Victor in the cellar, the way his hand lingered on her wrist, the intensity in his eyes when he told her she didn't have to run. She felt foolish for letting her thoughts spiral, for letting herself be affected by a man she barely knew. And yet, there was a spark, something alive in her that she hadn't felt in years. Anna decided to join a grape-sorting activity offered to guests. She thought the repetitive motion of picking through the fruit might help clear her mind. A few other visitors gathered at a long wooden table in the courtyard, chatting politely as they worked. "Need any help?" The familiar voice sent a shiver down her spine. Victor stood at the edge of the table, his sleeves rolled up again, revealing tanned forearms streaked with faint stains of grape juice. His presence was magnetic, impossible to ignore. "I think I can handle it," Anna said lightly, though her voice betrayed her nervousness. Victor smirked, pulling up a stool beside her. "I don't doubt that, but I wouldn't be much of a host if I didn't lend a hand." As he sat, their knees brushed under the table. Anna froze at the contact, her senses hyper-aware of his proximity. Victor didn't move away, and neither did she. The two of them worked side by side, their hands sorting through clusters of grapes. The occasional brush of his fingers against hers sent sparks up her arm, each accidental touch more charged than the last. At one point, Victor reached for the same cluster she did, their hands colliding. Anna tried to pull away, but his hand stayed on hers for a beat longer than necessary. "Sorry," he said, though his tone was anything but apologetic. "It's fine," she murmured, avoiding his gaze. Victor leaned in slightly, his voice low. "You're blushing." Anna felt the heat rising to her cheeks and cursed her fair complexion. "It's the sun," she lied, focusing intently on the grapes in front of her. Victor chuckled softly, the sound rich and intimate. "If you say so." As the day wore on, the tension between them became harder to ignore. During a lunch break, Anna tried to sit with another guest, but Victor appeared with a plate of food and joined her uninvited. "You're avoiding me," he said casually, as though commenting on the weather. "I'm not," she said quickly, though the words felt hollow. Victor's gaze was steady, unrelenting. "You are, but it's okay. I'm not the easiest person to be around." Anna frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged, his smile faint. "Some people find me intense." "Intense?" she echoed, her curiosity piqued despite herself. Victor leaned forward, his elbows on the table. I have a habit of seeing things others don't. It can make people uncomfortable. Anna's pulse quickened. And what do you see in me? For a moment, Victor didn't answer. He simply looked at her, his gaze peeling back the layers she had carefully constructed around herself. I see someone who's been invisible for too long, he said finally. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She looked away, her appetite gone. Victor reached across the table, his hand brushing hers lightly. The touch was brief but searing, as if he were branding her skin. You're not invisible to me, he added softly. That evening, Anna tried to lose herself in the vineyard's beauty. She wandered down a narrow path lined with grapevines, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the ground. She told herself she needed space, time to think. But she wasn't alone for long. Are you following me? She asked when Victor appeared, his silhouette cutting a striking figure against the twilight sky. Not intentionally, he said with a teasing smile. But I'm glad I found you. Anna crossed her arms, her defenses rising. Victor, I don't know what you're trying to do, but I'm not trying to do anything, he interrupted, his voice steady. I just wanted to see you, alone. The air between them grew heavy, charged with unspoken words and barely restrained desire. Victor stepped closer, and Anna's breath hitched. You don't have to keep running, he said, his voice low and intimate. I'm not running, she said, though her voice trembled. Victor reached out, his fingers brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. The touch was feather-light, but it sent a bolt of electricity through her. Then what are you afraid of? He asked. Anna swallowed hard, unable to answer. She felt as though she were standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground beneath her crumbling away. I should go, she said finally, stepping back. Victor didn't stop her, but his gaze followed her, burning into her as she walked away. Back in her room, Anna paced restlessly, her mind racing. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward Victor, the way he seemed to see right through her. But the guilt was suffocating, a heavy weight pressing on her chest. She tried to distract herself by reading, but the words on the page blurred. When she closed her eyes, all she could see was Victor. The curve of his smile, the warmth of his touch, the intensity in his eyes. For the first time in years, Anna felt alive. But she also felt dangerously close to crossing a line she could never uncross. The next morning, Anna resolved to keep her distance from Victor. She spent the day exploring the vineyard on her own, taking long walks through the rows of vines and sketching in the leather-bound notebook she'd brought with her. She didn't see him once, and for a while she felt relieved. But as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet, a knock came at her door. Anna opened it to find Victor standing there, his linen shirt unbuttoned at the collar and his expression unreadable. Evening, he said, holding up a bottle of wine. I thought you might want to join me for dinner. A proper introduction to the vineyard's best. She hesitated, her instincts screaming to say no. But before she could muster the courage, she heard herself say, Okay, just dinner. Victor's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. Just dinner. He led her down a narrow path through the vineyard, lit by strings of soft golden lights that hung between the vines. At the far end of the path was a small table set for two, illuminated by the flickering glow of candles. A bottle of wine and 2 glasses waited at the center. Do you always pull out all the stops for your guests? Anna asked, trying to sound casual. Victor held out a chair for her. Only the ones who deserve it. She rolled her eyes but sat down, feeling her cheeks warm. The meal was simple but exquisite. Freshly baked bread, creamy goat cheese, roasted vegetables, and grilled salmon. Victor poured her a glass of deep red wine, its aroma rich with hints of blackberry and oak. As they ate, they talked about everything and nothing. Victor told her stories about his childhood in Italy, his decision to move to California, and the struggles of running a vineyard. Anna shared bits and pieces of her life, carefully avoiding any mention of her husband. You're different tonight, Victor said after a while, his voice soft. How so? You're relaxed, open. He leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. I like this version of you. Anna felt a flicker of annoyance. You don't even know me. Victor's smile faded, replaced by something more serious. Maybe not, but I want to. The weight of his words hung in the air, and Anna didn't know how to respond. She looked away, taking a sip of wine to steady herself. After dinner, Victor suggested a walk through the vineyard. Anna agreed, though every rational part of her mind screamed at her to end the evening. The night was cool, the stars scattered like diamonds across the dark sky. Victor walked beside her, his hands in his pockets, his presence calm but undeniable. Why did you come here, Anna? He asked suddenly, breaking the silence. She hesitated. To get away. From what? Anna stopped walking, staring out at the rows of grapevines stretching into the distance. She thought about her husband, about the years of routine and predictability that had drained the life out of her. I don't know, she said finally. Victor stepped closer, his voice gentle but insistent. Yes, you do. Anna turned to him, her defenses crumbling. I don't want to talk about it. Victor nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. Then let's not talk. Before she could respond, he closed the distance between them, his hand brushing her cheek. The touch was tentative, as if he were giving her the chance to pull away. But she didn't. Victor leaned in, his lips brushing against hers. The kiss was soft at first, a question more than a statement. Anna's breath hitched, her body tense with a mix of desire and guilt. When she didn't pull away, Victor deepened the kiss, his hands sliding to the back of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair. Anna's resolve crumbled completely, and she kissed him back, her hands gripping the fabric of his shirt. The world around them disappeared, the vineyard fading into a blur of moonlight and shadows. All that existed was the warmth of his lips, the strength of his arms as they wrapped around her, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, Anna felt dizzy, her heart pounding in her chest. She took a shaky step back, her mind racing. This was a mistake, she whispered, though the words felt hollow. Victor studied her, his expression unreadable. Do you believe that? Anna looked away, unable to meet his gaze. I can't do this. Victor reached for her hand, his touch gentle. You don't have to decide anything tonight. She shook her head, pulling her hand away. I should go. Victor didn't stop her as she turned and walked back toward the main estate. But as she disappeared into the night, she felt the weight of his eyes on her, as though he were daring her to look back. She didn't. Anna spent the next day avoiding Victor, throwing herself into any activity that kept her busy and surrounded by people. She toured the winery, joined a cooking class, and even signed up for a yoga session. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape the memory of his kiss. She replayed it over and over. The softness of his lips, the warmth of his hands, the way he looked at her afterward, as if she were the only woman in the world. It left her restless, her mind clouded with guilt and longing. That evening, as the sky darkened and the vineyard quieted, a note was slipped under her door. Meet me in the cellar. Midnight. The handwriting was bold and elegant. There was no signature, but she knew who it was from. First, Anna told herself she wouldn't go. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the magnetic pull of Victor's invitation. But as the clock ticked closer to midnight, she found herself standing in front of her mirror, smoothing her dress and brushing her hair. When the time came, she slipped out of her room and made her way to the cellar, her heart pounding with every step. The cellar was dimly lit, the flickering light of candles casting long shadows across the stone walls. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of oak and wine. Victor stood near the center, leaning casually against a barrel, a glass of red wine in his hand. You came, he said, his voice low and warm. Anna hesitated in the doorway. I shouldn't be here. Victor set his glass down and walked toward her, his movements slow and deliberate. Then why are you? Anna opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Victor stopped just inches away, his eyes searching hers. I can't stop thinking about you, he admitted, his voice heavy with sincerity. Her breath hitched. Victor, He reached out, his hand brushing her cheek. "Tell me to stop and I will." Anna closed her eyes, her resolve crumbling. She could feel the heat of his body, the intoxicating pull of his presence. When she didn't protest, Victor tilted her chin up and kissed her. This kiss was different from the last, hungrier, more urgent. Victor's hands slid to her waist, pulling her against him. Anna's arms wrapped around his neck, her fingers tangling in his hair. Their breaths mingled, the taste of wine on their lips as the kiss deepened. Victor's hands moved to the small of her back, pressing her closer as if he couldn't get enough of her. "I've wanted this since the moment I saw you," he murmured against her lips. Anna's heart raced, her body responding to his every touch. She should stop. She knew she should, but the desire coursing through her was too powerful to ignore. Victor led her to a small corner of the cellar, where a plush rug and pillows were arranged near the candles. It looked deliberate, but Anna was too caught up in the moment to care. He guided her down onto the rug, his movements slow and unhurried. His hands explored her body, tracing every curve with reverence. Anna's breaths came faster, her senses overwhelmed by the feel of him. The strength of his hands, the warmth of his skin, the way he whispered her name like a prayer. She let herself go completely, surrendering to the passion between them. Victor undressed her with practiced care, his fingers brushing her skin like the lightest of caresses. He kissed her neck, her shoulders, every inch of her that he could reach, his touch igniting a fire within her. When their bodies finally joined, it was like nothing Anna had ever experienced. The intensity, the connection, the raw emotion. It consumed her, leaving no room for guilt or second thoughts. Afterward, they lay tangled together on the rug, the candles burning low around them. Victor traced lazy circles on her bare shoulder, his touch soothing and tender. "You're incredible," he said softly, his voice filled with wonder. Anna rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For the first time in years, she felt seen, truly seen. But as the euphoria began to fade, reality crept back in. She thought of her husband, of the life she had left behind to come here. The weight of her actions pressed down on her, threatening to suffocate her. "I should go," she whispered, sitting up and reaching for her clothes. Victor propped himself up on one elbow, watching her with a mix of confusion and concern. "Stay," he said. "Just a little longer." Anna shook her head, her back turned to him. "I can't." Victor didn't try to stop her as she dressed and left the cellar. But as she walked back to her room, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Desire, guilt, confusion. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The days that followed were a blur for Anna. She tried to keep herself busy with the vineyard's activities, but it was impossible to escape the pull of Victor. Every time she caught sight of him, leading a tour, inspecting the vines, or even just walking across the courtyard, her heart skipped a beat. She could still feel his hands on her body, the heat of his breath against her skin, and the way he'd made her feel more alive than she had in years. But with the memory came guilt, a heavy shadow that clung to her every thought. She couldn't ignore the voice in her head, reminding her that she was married, that she had made vows. Yet, whenever Victor appeared, those thoughts faded into the background, drowned out by the intensity of her desire. It wasn't long before Victor found her again. Anna was sitting beneath an oak tree near the edge of the vineyard, sketching absent-mindedly in her notebook. The warm afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled patterns on the ground. "I was starting to think you were avoiding me." Victor's voice came from behind her, smooth and teasing. Anna looked up, her heart fluttering at the sight of him. He was dressed casually in a white shirt and jeans, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. The way he carried himself, confident yet not overbearing, made it impossible to look away. "Maybe I was," she said lightly, though her voice wavered. Victor crouched down beside her, his eyes locking onto hers. "And yet here I am," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. Anna closed her notebook, suddenly self-conscious. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered, though she wasn't sure whether she was trying to convince him or herself. Victor reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch was so tender, so deliberate, that Anna felt her resolve slipping. "Then tell me to leave," he said softly. "Say the word, and I'll walk away." Anna opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. Victor took that as his answer. Their meetings became a routine. In the mornings, Anna would join Victor in the vineyard, helping him inspect the vines or sort grapes. They kept their interactions professional in front of others, but when they were alone, the tension between them was undeniable. Afternoons were spent stealing moments together, hidden kisses in the wine cellar, whispered conversations in the shade of the vines. Victor's passion for life was infectious, and Anna found herself drawn to him in ways she couldn't explain. One afternoon, as they sat together on a blanket beneath a tree, Victor reached for her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "You make me forget everything else," he said, his voice low and intimate. Anna looked at him, her heart aching with a mix of happiness and guilt. "You make me feel things I thought I'd lost," she admitted. Victor leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her lips. "Stay with me," he murmured against her mouth. Anna pulled back, her expression conflicted. "You know I can't." Victor's jaw tightened, but he didn't push her. Instead, he cupped her face in his hands, his eyes searching hers. "Then let's not think about anything else," he said. "Not right now." The nights were the hardest. Victor would sneak into her room after the estate had gone quiet, and they would lose themselves in each other. Their encounters were filled with urgency and passion, as though they were trying to make up for lost time. One night, as they lay tangled together in the dim light of her room, Victor traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Why do you keep holding back?" he asked softly. Anna stared at the ceiling, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. "Because this isn't real," she said finally. Victor propped himself up on one elbow, his expression unreadable. "It feels real to me." She turned to look at him, her heart breaking at the vulnerability in his eyes. "Victor, you don't know me. Not really." "I know enough," he said firmly. "I know you're unhappy. I know you deserve more than what you've been settling for." Anna felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "It's not that simple." Victor leaned down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "It could be," he whispered. The following morning, Anna woke up alone. Victor had slipped out before dawn, leaving behind only the faint scent of his cologne on her pillow. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart heavy. She knew she couldn't keep living in this fantasy. Sooner or later, reality would catch up with her, and she would have to make a choice. But for now, she let herself savor the memory of his touch, his kiss, and the way he made her feel like the woman she used to be. The vineyard felt different now. Every glance, every accidental brush of fingers, every whispered conversation with Victor carried a weight of expectation and danger. Their affair had evolved into something neither of them could easily control. What had started as fleeting moments of passion now felt like a fire threatening to consume everything. For Anna, the thrill was undeniable, but so was the risk. She began to notice subtle changes around her, furtive looks from staff members, lingering glances from other guests. It felt as though their secret was no longer as well kept as they thought. One afternoon, as Anna helped Victor inspect the vines, one of the vineyard's employees, a young woman named Sophia, lingered nearby. She seemed to be watching them, her gaze sharp and calculating. "You think she suspects something?" Anna asked softly when Sophia disappeared down the row of vines. Victor glanced in the direction Sophia had gone, then shrugged. "It doesn't matter." Anna frowned. "Of course it matters. What if she tells someone?" Victor reached for her hand, his touch steadying her. "Anna, listen to me. Nobody here has the right to question what we do." She wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. Victor might be unconcerned, but Anna felt the walls closing in. The risk became undeniable that evening at a wine-tasting event. Victor was leading the session, charming the crowd with his poetic descriptions of the wines. Anna sat at a table near the back, watching him, captivated as always by his presence. But her attention was drawn away when she noticed Sophia across the room, speaking in hushed tones with another staff member. They both glanced in her direction, then quickly looked away. Anna's stomach twisted. After the session ended, she caught Victor by the arm as he packed up the wine bottles. "We need to talk," she whispered. Victor's brow furrowed. "What's wrong?" "Sophia," Anna said, lowering her voice further. "She's watching us. I think she knows." Victor smirked, shaking his head. "Sophia's harmless. Don't let her get in your head." But Anna wasn't convinced. The following day, Anna received an unexpected phone call. She stood on the balcony of her room, the phone pressed to her ear as her husband's voice filled the line. "I just wanted to check in," he said. "You've been gone for over a week now." Anna felt a wave of guilt crash over her. "I'm fine," she said quickly. "I just needed a little more time." Her husband hesitated. "Is everything okay? You sound different." Anna's chest tightened. "I'm fine," she repeated. "I'll be home soon." When the call ended, she stayed on the balcony, staring out at the vineyard. The weight of her double life pressed down on her, suffocating her. That night, Anna met Victor in the cellar. She couldn't stay away, even as her guilt and fear grew. "You're distracted," Victor said, his hand tracing slow circles on her back. "I got a call from my husband," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor stiffened but said nothing. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," Anna continued, her voice trembling. "Every day, it feels like someone is watching us. And the guilt, it's eating me alive." Victor cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Anna, look at me." She did, her eyes brimming with tears. "This isn't just a fling for me," he said, his voice steady. "You mean something to me, and I think I mean something to you, too." Anna's breath hitched. "You do?" she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "But that doesn't make this right." Victor leaned his forehead against hers. "Sometimes the right thing isn't what you expect. Sometimes it's what sets you free." The next morning, Anna woke to find a small envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a note in Victor's handwriting. "Meet me at the northern edge of the vineyard tonight. Midnight." She hesitated, her heart pounding. The risks were growing every day, but so was her longing for him. That night, as the clock struck midnight, Anna slipped out of her room and made her way to the meeting spot. Victor was waiting for her, his silhouette outlined by the moonlight. "This is dangerous," she said as she approached him. Victor smiled faintly. "The best things in life usually are." They shared a brief, heated kiss before Victor led her deeper into the vineyard. He had set up a secluded spot among the vines, a blanket, candles, and a bottle of wine. "This is reckless," Anna murmured as they sat together. Victor poured them each a glass of wine. "It's living," he said simply. As they sipped their wine, the tension between them gave way to passion. They kissed under the stars, their bodies entwined among the vines. For a brief moment, Anna forgot about the risks, the guilt, and the secrets. All that mattered was Victor and the way he made her feel alive. But as they lay together in the darkness, Anna couldn't shake the feeling that their time was running out. The risks were becoming too great, and she knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. The sun was setting, casting the vineyard in warm hues of gold and amber. Anna stood on the balcony of her room, staring out at the sprawling rows of vines. The past few weeks felt like a dream, intoxicating, exhilarating, but also dangerous. The weight of her affair with Victor was growing heavier with each passing day. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone ringing. She glanced at the screen and froze. It was her husband. For a moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail, but guilt forced her to answer. "Hi," she said, her voice strained. "Anna," he said, his tone firm but not angry. "I'm coming to see you." Anna's heart dropped. "What? Why?" "I've been thinking," he said. "You've been gone too long. Something feels off, and I think we need to talk." She opened her mouth to protest, but the line went dead. Panic surged through her. Later that evening, Anna found Victor in the cellar, inspecting a row of barrels. He turned as she entered, his expression softening. "You look upset," he said, stepping closer. "My husband is coming," Anna blurted out. Victor's brow furrowed. "When?" "Tomorrow," she said, pacing. "He's suspicious. I don't know what he knows, but I can't let him find out about us." Victor reached for her hand, stopping her. "Then we'll deal with it." Anna pulled away, her voice rising. "How, Victor? This isn't just some game. If he finds out..." She trailed off, her chest heaving. Victor stepped closer, his gaze steady. "Do you love him?" The question caught her off guard. She stared at him, her heart pounding. "I don't know," she admitted. Victor's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Then tell him the truth." Anna shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't. It'll destroy him. It'll destroy everything." The next day, Anna anxiously awaited her husband's arrival. She tried to distract herself with vineyard activities, but her mind was a whirlwind of fear and anticipation. By late afternoon, a sleek black car pulled into the estate's driveway. Anna's husband, Mark, stepped out, looking every bit the polished professional in his tailored suit. He smiled as he spotted her, but there was a tension in his expression that made her stomach churn. "Hi," he said, pulling her into a quick hug. "You look different." "Do I?" she asked, her voice strained. Mark studied her, his brow furrowing. "You do. Happier, maybe. Or distracted." Anna forced a smile. "It's just the fresh air." Mark didn't look convinced. That evening, the vineyard hosted a small gathering for guests. Anna and Mark attended together, blending in with the crowd. But Anna couldn't stop glancing at Victor, who was mingling with other guests. Their eyes met briefly, and her heart skipped a beat. Mark noticed. "Who's that?" he asked, nodding toward Victor. "No one," Anna said quickly, looking away. Mark's eyes narrowed. "You're lying." Anna's stomach dropped. "I'm not." But Mark wasn't convinced. He excused himself from the table, weaving through the crowd toward Victor. Anna followed, her heart pounding. When Mark reached Victor, he extended a hand. "Mark, Anna's husband." Victor hesitated for the briefest moment before shaking his hand. "Victor, I run the vineyard." The two men exchanged pleasantries, but Mark's tone was laced with suspicion. "Anna's mentioned you," he said, though it wasn't true. Victor glanced at Anna, his expression unreadable. "I hope she's been enjoying her stay." "She has," Mark said, his eyes narrowing. "Almost too much." Anna's breath caught. "Mark, can we go somewhere private?" But Mark ignored her. "You seem very familiar," he said to Victor, his voice low and cutting. Victor held his ground, his expression calm. "I make it a point to get to know all our guests." Mark's jaw tightened, and Anna stepped between them. "Stop it," she hissed. "This isn't the place." Later, back in their room, Mark confronted her. "Something's going on," he said, his voice sharp. "You've been distant for months, and now I find you here, acting like a completely different person." Anna tried to deflect, but Mark wouldn't let it go. "Is it him?" he demanded. "That vineyard guy?" Anna froze, her silence giving her away. Mark laughed bitterly. "Unbelievable. I knew it." Tears welled in Anna's eyes. "Mark, don't," he said, his voice breaking. "Don't insult me by lying now." Anna sat down, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "But it did," Mark said coldly. The weight of her confession hung between them, heavy and suffocating. The next morning, Mark packed his bags. "I need time to think," he said, his voice hollow. Anna didn't try to stop him. As she watched his car disappear down the driveway, she felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. She knew she had made her choice, but the consequences were only beginning to unfold. The morning after Mark left, Anna woke with a heavy weight on her chest. She stared at the ceiling, replaying the confrontation in her mind. The raw pain in Mark's voice haunted her, as did the bitter truth. She had destroyed her marriage. But it wasn't just the end of her marriage that unsettled her. It was the realization that her affair with Victor, as intoxicating as it was, had been built on passion and escape, not on the foundation of a stable future. Anna found Victor in the vineyard later that morning. He was standing among the rows of vines, inspecting the grapes. He turned as she approached, his expression softening when he saw her. "Mark left," she said, her voice flat. Victor nodded, stepping closer. "Are you okay?" "No," she admitted. "I'm not." Victor reached for her, but she stepped back, her arms crossed. "I don't think I can do this anymore," she said, her voice trembling. Victor froze, his eyes searching hers. "Anna, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I made a mistake," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "This is us. It's not sustainable." Victor's jaw tightened. "You don't mean that." "I do," she said, though the words felt like knives in her chest. "I can't keep living like this, sneaking around, lying, feeling like everything is about to collapse. I need to figure out who I am, but I can't do that with you." Victor took a step closer, his voice low and urgent. "Anna, we've come too far for you to walk away now. What we have, it's real. You said it yourself." Anna shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It is real, Victor, but it's also selfish. I've hurt too many people. I've hurt myself. I need to stop before I destroy everything." Victor's expression darkened, his frustration breaking through. "So what? You go back to a life where you're invisible? Where no one sees you the way I do? That's not fair," she snapped. "You don't get to decide what's right for me." Victor exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I love you, Anna." The words hung in the air, heavy and heartbreaking. Anna's knees weakened, but she forced herself to stand firm. "I care about you, Victor," she said softly. "But love isn't enough. Not like this." They stood in silence, the vineyard around them eerily quiet. Anna could see the pain in Victor's eyes, and it tore at her. "Is this really what you want?" he asked finally, his voice hoarse. "It's what I need," she said, her voice breaking. Victor nodded slowly, his shoulders sagging in defeat. "Then I won't stop you." Anna stepped closer, her hand brushing his cheek. "You helped me see myself again, Victor. For that, I'll always be grateful. But this, it has to end." Victor closed his eyes, leaning into her touch for a fleeting moment before stepping back. "Goodbye, Anna," he said quietly. She turned and walked away, her heart shattering with every step. That night, Anna packed her bags. The room felt emptier than it had ever been, the memories of her time with Victor lingering like ghosts. As she zipped her suitcase, she glanced at the balcony, remembering the nights she had stood there, lost in thought. For the first time in weeks, she felt a strange sense of clarity. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she needed to face it alone. Before leaving the next morning, Anna stopped by the vineyard one last time. She found Victor standing near the edge of the property, staring out at the horizon. He didn't turn as she approached, but she knew he sensed her presence. "I'm leaving," she said softly. Victor nodded but said nothing. "Goodbye, Victor," she said, her voice trembling. He finally turned, his expression unreadable. "Take care of yourself, Anna." She nodded, her chest tightening. Without another word, she walked away, the gravel crunching beneath her feet. As Anna drove away from the vineyard, tears streamed down her face. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of passion, betrayal, and self-discovery. She had lost so much, but she had also found something she hadn't known she was searching for. A glimmer of her own strength. It wasn't the ending she had imagined, but it was the one she needed. The drive back home was long and silent, the familiar landscape rushing past Anna like a blur. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, her mind racing with thoughts of what awaited her. Mark, the house they had built together, the life she was about to unravel. When she pulled into the driveway, the house felt foreign to her, its walls filled with memories she no longer recognized as her own. She sat in the car for a long moment, staring at the front door, before finally summoning the courage to go inside. Mark was in the living room, a suitcase open beside him. He glanced up as she entered, his expression guarded. "You're back," he said, his tone devoid of emotion. "I am," Anna replied softly, setting her keys on the table. An awkward silence filled the room, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Mark stood and crossed his arms. "Did you figure it out?" he asked, his voice bitter. Anna swallowed hard. "Mark, we need to talk." He let out a humorless laugh. "Oh, I think we're way past talking, don't you?" Anna flinched but pressed on. "I'm sorry for what I've done, for how I hurt you. I can't take it back, but I need to be honest with you. I don't think I can be the wife you deserve." Mark's jaw tightened, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And what about the promises we made? The life we built? Does that mean nothing to you?" "It meant everything to me," Anna said, her voice trembling. "But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I became someone I didn't even recognize anymore. And I didn't know how to fix it." Mark sat down heavily on the couch, running a hand through his hair. "Was it him? That man at the vineyard?" Anna hesitated before nodding. "Yes, but it wasn't just about him. It was about me. About realizing that I've been living a life that doesn't feel like mine." Mark stared at her, his expression a mix of anger, pain, and disbelief. "Do you even want to try to fix this?" Anna's chest tightened. She wanted to say yes, to offer him the hope he deserved, but she knew it would be a lie. "I think it's best if we let each other go," she said softly. Mark looked away, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I don't even know who you are anymore." Anna felt tears streaming down her face. "I don't either, but I'm trying to find out." The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, difficult conversations, and small, painful goodbyes. Anna and Mark agreed to separate amicably, though the process was anything but easy. Anna moved into a small apartment across town, a far cry from the spacious home she had shared with Mark. The quiet was unsettling at first, but it also brought a strange sense of peace. She filled her days with work, therapy, and moments of self-reflection. She started taking art classes at a local studio, rediscovering her love for sketching and painting. Slowly, she began to rebuild herself piece by piece. One afternoon, as she walked through a park near her apartment, Anna's phone buzzed. It was an email from Victor. "Anna, I hope this message finds you well. I've thought about you every day since you left. I don't know where life has taken you, but I want you to know that I still care deeply about you. You helped me see the world in a new way, and for that, I'll always be grateful. If you ever want to talk, or if you ever find yourself back in Napa, I'd love to see you. Take care of yourself. Victor." Anna stared at the message, her heart twisting with a mix of longing and closure. She started typing a response, then stopped, her finger hovering over the keyboard. Finally, she closed the email and slipped her phone back into her pocket. She wasn't ready to respond, not yet. Months later, Anna stood in her small studio apartment, staring at a canvas she had been working on for weeks. It was a painting of a vineyard, the rows of grapevines bathed in golden sunlight. The scene was bittersweet, a reflection of a chapter in her life that had changed her forever. She stepped back, studying the painting with a critical eye. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. For the first time in years, Anna felt like she was starting to understand herself. Her desires, her flaws, her strengths. She wasn't defined by her mistakes, nor was she bound by the choices of her past. She was free. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.